years, a great, great statesman. I want to thank you, the members here in Georgia, for what you've done over the last 30 years, really, to make Georgia a leader. We're the 8th most populous state in the country, the best state in the country in which to do business for the 7th straight year. Every speaker up here today is going to remind you of that. My role today, I think, is to remind us of how that happened. First of all, government works in Georgia. We've got a governor that understands what business-friendly means. We've got a mayor in Atlanta, the biggest city in the Southeast, who understands what it means. We all understand what infrastructure means. We understand what it means to have capital flow. As a matter of fact, the state legislature here is a model. Originally, when the United States Senate and the United States House of Representatives, they operated the same way the state legislature in Georgia does today. For 124 years, the state U.S. Senate and the U.S. House of Representatives only worked for about 45 days a year. Some of you might accuse us of not working that many days now, but the truth is, until 1913, when the Senate started to being elected and not appointed, they worked about 45 days a year. They passed the budget, they came home and lived under the laws that they wrote, just like our state legislators do today. They're citizen legislators. That's what the founders had in mind. This idea of a career politician is a second half of the 20th century manifestation, and it's one that does not serve us very well, I'm sorry, at the federal level. But what I want to thank you for is the past few years of economic prosperity that we've enjoyed in Georgia. As a matter of fact, in the last 75 years, the United States has enjoyed the greatest era of economic boom in the history of humankind. In the history of no party, no political party owns that responsibility and accountability for that. We have enjoyed the blessings that God has given this country. And on the back of that free enterprise system, the free market system that has served us so well over the last 75 years, and I would argue over 230 years, on the back of that, we were able to do several things. Number one, we helped rebuild the rest of the world with the Marshall Plan in Europe and Asia after World War II. Second, we opened our markets up. We set our trade rules in such a way that we help the third world develop. I've seen that. I've lived in Europe and lived in Asia and worked around most of the world. I've seen that happen in my lifetime. And yet today, we have an active debate about what it is that we think made this happen. Some people believe that the federal government made this happen. Some people believe that we need to have a central control of capital in America today. I would argue this, that the miracle that we've enjoyed over the last 75 years came from several things. One, capital formation, innovation, the rule of law, on the back of what I would argue the best workforce in the history of the world. And I can back up all four of those facets that created this economic miracle. And we take it for granted, and I'm here to tell you we cannot afford to do that. You, being the Chamber of Commerce, I'm underlining the word commerce, feel real good to me because I used to have market share in the 40 and 50%. But seriously, we have an opportunity right now in America to set the stage for 50 to 100 years for our kids and grandkids to have another 100 years of the greatest economic, and best of all, we have an opportunity to help the rest of the world enjoy that and everybody in America. Look, we have income disparity in America today. Of course we do. We have safety nets. We have the most philanthropic country in the history of the world today. We bring more legal immigrants into our country than any other country in the world. We have a self-identity problem in America. We're the greatest country in the history of the world, y'all. And yet, if one African-American boy in Perry, Georgia, isn't taught to read at the fourth grade, by the fourth grade, that boy probably won't graduate from high school. That's our fault. There's no excuse for that, and we can fix that. Today, I believe we're in the midst of the greatest economic turnaround in U.S. history right now. After President Trump came into office, I was part of a meeting in the White House. There were 8 people there. It was the president, vice president, myself, and 5 leaders from the Senate and the House. Now, I'm not a leader in the Congress. In fact, as a matter of fact, I haven't drunk the Kool-Aid. They don't know what to do with me. So that makes me very dangerous. And so what happens is when I get called into meetings, there are no holes barred. So we decided to work on, job one was growing the economy. We had to, after a decade of slow growth, the lowest in American history, we decided that we had to get the economy going and create jobs. So we focused on regulation, energy, taxes, and Dodd-Frank. And some of this is in a bipartisan way. And I will tell you that we did those things. In a bipartisan way, we passed a Dodd-Frank bill that saved our community banks. Some of you in small towns know that we were losing 3,500 community banks in this country because of the most onerous parts of Dodd-Frank. Now look, parts of Dodd-Frank are necessary for the major money center banks in New York, but not necessarily for the bank in Hahira that had nothing to do with the debacle in 8 and 9. So we have fixed that. That was a bipartisan bill. We pulled back on about 2,500 regulations, and the economy jumped because CEO confidence went up, capital expense went up, and guess what? Jobs followed. Consumer confidence followed, and now we have the cycle beginning to turn of what's called the free market, free enterprise system. We passed a tax bill that makes us more competitive with the rest of the world and freed up about $2 to $3 trillion of capital stuck overseas in unnecessary tax on repatriating tax. We've gotten rid of that now, and that money's flowing back. As a matter of fact, in a $20 trillion economy that we have today, we have freed up about $6 trillion. $2 trillion on the bank balance sheets of the community banks I was talking about because of over capital requirements that were unnecessary. $2 trillion on the Russell 1000, the largest companies in the country, because of over-regulation. All that's been freed up, and we're moving now. And the results are staggering. We have all the evidence we need in this debate about capitalism that what we believe in, free market system, free enterprise system, actually works. 7.5 million jobs have been created in the last 3 years. As a matter of fact, today, what we've exposed, and I'll get to the second phase in a minute, what we've exposed is we have the number one limiting factor on growing this economy right now is jobs. Not jobs, I'm sorry, labor. We create jobs, but the number one thing it exposed is that we don't have enough qualified workers in America. We have almost 8 million job openings right now in America and only 5 million people looking for work. It's the first time that's happened in my lifetime, guys. We can fix that, and it's being fixed as I speak. I believe right now we have the highest middle class income ever measured in the United States, the lowest unemployment in 50 years, the lowest Asian, Hispanic, and African American unemployment ever measured. And the fact that I'm most proud of is that this is a broad recovery. By broad, I mean the quartile of income that is benefiting the most from this result that we're seeing right now comes in the lowest quartile of income. They're getting benefit. And the measure of that is this. After 55 years of implementing the Great War on Poverty that was perpetrated by the Great Society in 1965, it all failed because the poverty rate in January of 2017 was basically the same as it was in 1965. While because of our trade and our trade policies, our military, and opening up our market, we've reduced global poverty in that period of time over 50%. But in America, we had not touched it. In the last 3 years, I'm just here to tell you, this is a fact, 2.5 million people have pulled themselves out of poverty because of the free enterprise system that is now free to breathe. And I'm proud of that fact. The second phase was supposed to move to immigration, trade, and infrastructure. Well, why is that? Well, the first phase, we get investment going, we get the economy going, jobs created. We will expose the problem we have in labor. So we need an immigration process that allows workers to come in the United States. You know, prior to 1965, if you were a foreign national student coming to a U.S. college and you got a college degree or a trade certification, you got an automatic pathway to citizenship. The Great Society changed that. So it's today of 1.1 million people we bring into America legally. These are legal citizens that we're giving green cards to every year. 1.1 million, more than anybody else in the history of the world. 1.1 million, only 70,000 come into work. That's a problem. We can fix that. I proposed a bill in 2017 that would move us to a Canadian or Australian or New Zealand style merit-based immigration system. It didn't pass, but we're going to have another shot at it. The president's going to roll out his platform here in a couple of months, and it'll be all-inclusive. The second thing is infrastructure. Well, I tell the president right away, he had two of the best infrastructure projects going in the United States when he walked into office. One was right here in Savannah. We've been trying for 20 years to deepen that port. Right, Ben? 20 years trying to deepen this port down there. And now all of a sudden, I can tell you, because of the work we've done the last year or two, we now have secured the appropriation for that port, so it will be completed within the next 2 years. The other infrastructure we got to work on. Mayor, the roads are getting a lot better in Atlanta. In fact, they're so good now, it seems to me, every day at 5 o'clock, half the cars in America want to come to Atlanta to drive around our roads. So we got a lot of work to do there. But there's a public-private partnership in our future that I believe can provide the way. And it's not just a federal government that's going to do that. We all have to share in that responsibility. Trade. I'm going to leave here in just a minute to try to catch a 10:30 plane out here. 13D is my seat, in case any of you are questioning that. I'm going to go back and we're going to sign pass the USMCA law in the United States Senate today. Now, let me give you a perspective. What President Trump is trying to do, what no other president, Republican or Democrat, has done really in the last 50 years. And that is to create a level playing field with the rest of the world. If we want to grow the economy at 3%, you've got to increase the organic growth of our workforce, the imported workforce that we bring in legal immigration, and we've got to grow our exports. Well, grow the exports, you got to get access. When China did not have a middle class, we didn't need access to their markets. When I lived over there, they didn't have one. Today, their middle class is 400 million people. We have 150 million middle class consumers. I can do that math. Of course we need access. So what we've done, we now have a new free trade agreement with South Korea, Japan, now with Canada and Mexico. We have the UK, we have Europe and Australia are all in here with agreements in principle. Folks, we've got pretty much all the benefits of TPP without any of the negative. It's incredible what's happened just in the last 2 years. But the one I'm most proud of, and the one that's even just now just beginning to work, is our relationship with China. The number one thing that I'm bringing to Washington, have lived over there, is that we cannot fall into another 50-year Cold War or arms race with China. It's unnecessary. They don't want it, we don't want it, but we can blindly fall into that. The best way to avoid that, I believe, to start with, is to have an open and honest trade relationship. They call themselves the largest developing country. We are the largest developed country. Well, if they're at $13 trillion, and if I adjust for purchasing power parity, they're about the same size as we are. And so right now, I believe we are moving in a way that can give us a step-by-step, incremental way to have a fair and level playing field with China. We are going to sign that, I believe, this morning. The president in the Rose Garden is actually signing the first phase agreement that will change the way we deal with China. We're trying to do 5 things with China. Not all of them are trade. We want them to stop stealing our technology, stop forcing the transfer of technology, comply with the WTO, stop the cyber war, and give us equal access. Well, equal access is moving. We're going to move ag products, and ag is the biggest industry in Georgia. We're going to move ag products exported to China from $9 billion to between 40 and 50, and I think that number is going to go higher when we get through with this. Let me close with this. If we don't get to the next phase, whoever are our political leaders, and that is saving Social Security and Medicare, none of the rest of this matters. My wife says I can bring any cocktail party to its knees now, so I'll warn you about this going in. We have a debt crisis in America. If we don't save Social Security and Medicare, even though the economy's moving, even though CBO, Congressional Budget Office, says that with the growth that we're now experiencing, if we maintain that over 10 years, and I believe we can, that we've lowered the debt curve between $2 and $3 trillion, the curve. We spend less in discretionary spending today than we did in 2011 as a percentage of the economy. You don't know that. That doesn't come through the media. What is not being talked about are the mandatory expenditures that are exploding away from us. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, pension and benefits for federal employees, and the interest on the debt. Whoever are our leaders, you being the business community in Georgia, have got to hold us accountable to get at that. Because without that, we're going to fail as a country. We'll lose the right to defend ourselves. We'll lose the right to have a safety net. We'll lose the right to prepare the world not only for a peaceful future and prosperous future, but a safe future. It all hinges on that. Let me give you some hope this morning. You read about the partisan politics in Washington. Boy, it's there. Teresa just asked me, how is it different being a CEO versus being a senator? It's a total different world, y'all. I could make decisions there and live with it. But we had to compromise in the real world. Right now, I can't find people to compromise with up there. It's just a strange world. I mean, when did it ever say in business or in life that we were going to get everything we wanted? Are any of you married? Well, I try to get that in Washington. Right now, the polarization by the leadership of both parties It's such that, well, I want more people on my side than you have, so I'll be in control. The American people are in control, but the career politician has gotten to a point where now they think they're in control. And it's up to us to change that. But here from Atlanta called me a couple years ago and said, we have a problem with our historic black colleges and universities. I said, what's that? So we figured it out. He quarterbacked that bill in the House. I did it in the Senate. We passed a historic bill that takes the risk away from funding our historic black colleges and universities. And I'm very proud of that. The second thing, the number one messy bureaucracy in Washington was the Veterans Administration. We passed 97-2, a bill that allows the head of the VA to fire people for not doing their jobs. And to date, over 9,000 people have been fired at the VA because of not doing their work. Now, they get due process, but they've been fired for not doing their job. And the last thing, I mentioned Dodd-Frank earlier. This really gives me hope because it was in the banking committee. I'm on the banking committee, and we wrestled this to the ground, and 4 Democrats stood up and took a chance and said, yes, we agree with you. Our local banks, our community banks are being decimated. They got beat up by the press, by everybody else, but they stood firm with us. We got it to the floor, and 17 Democrats did the same thing with Republicans, and we got together and marshaled that bill to a point where it didn't look anything that I wanted, but it was better than what we have, and we compromised, and we got it done. That's the way that this government was assumed to work, y'all. Winston Churchill, no less than Winston Churchill, says that this debate about free enterprise and a socialist agenda is just this. The problem with capitalism is it's the imperfect allocation of prosperity. The imperfect allocation of prosperity. The problem with socialism, it's the perfect allocation of misery. This isn't the first time we've had this debate. In Great Britain, right after World War II, we had just defeated fascism. And then they had an active debate about what and they decided that free enterprise got them there, they were going to stay with it. And that's what I hope we'll do here in America. I'm committed to make sure that this free enterprise, free market system that's the backbone of our capitalism and our freedom remains strong for our children and our grandchildren. Thank you for being here today. God bless you for supporting the Chamber. God bless Georgia, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you.